want to explore one very interesting concept with you. Especially in Sandhill Road. I'm sure you're more familiar with the Sandhill Road now because you've been there.
Sure.
The importance of positive signaling or network effects, as they call it. How important do you think, as a fund manager, is sort of your reputation, which helps you sort of get access to these investors, or is it just a myth?
Are you asking as a founder or as an investor?
As an investor,
As an investor. Yeah, it's a great question. So look, many blogs are written about be the best version of you can be. Keep trying, keep persevering. Perseverance is the secret to success. All that is true. Those are truisms for a reason, right? But let's be honest. Reality works in very interesting ways that not too many people can predict all the time. One very important determining factor of reality is how networks shape end consequences. So you're absolutely right. People with more experience, a sharper track record, more publicly defensible integrity, just are able to attract better quality outcomes to themselves, right? So whether it's recruiting the best people, whether it's having access to the best investors, whether it's LPs seeking you out instead of you seeking out LPs. LPs are investors in funds, limited partners, right? So almost always VC funds are looking out for introductions to investors who can put capital in their fund. But when those investors are looking for you, they're asking other people, connect me to him, connect me to her. That's when there's a positive network effect. It's outbound, right? So it takes, I would say, there's no shortcut to building that. And the public sphere today is riddled with failures of people who have tried to mimic or shortcut, credibility or that gravity well of influence, and it's crashed and burned around them miserably. So Siddharth and I, look, honestly, when we started, we were very young. We were in a hurry. And we were wildly optimistic. And I can argue those are the reasons you can go incredibly wrong incredibly quickly. But thankfully, we were coached well enough by our mentors and our experiences, our academics and so on, to be very clear that this is a 10-year game. Every fund we raise, every fund that we're planning to raise is an 8 to 10-year trajectory. There is no shortcut to that. We cannot shortcut success. We cannot make what happens in 8 years happen in 2 years. However hard we try, there is a factor of time that has to be respected. And if you sit and meditate and introspect and understand and embrace the fact that you will have to spend the time and build this credibly the right way, I can promise you, once you come to that realization, whatever happens in your daily life, there is I would say, a frontier of integrity that you build inside you that you will never compromise. So you will never try to shortcut a founder and try to pull the wool over their eyes, or try to play some silly trick on a contract, or try to get too smart when you're negotiating a term sheet, or try to get too smart when you're negotiating with an investor in your fund. You realize that there are things that just don't need to happen a certain way, right? So when you have that laser focus on doing things the right way, however mutated or polluted the ecosystem might be, right? And of course, when it comes to money, there are many people with the wrong motivations. Many people who will say whatever it takes to get the money, many people who lie, cheat, steal. So there are obviously integrity issues in any economy. There's fraud, so on and so forth. So let's be clear about reality. It is not easy. But if you have an internal compass that is very clear and never compromising, your ability to just push out of that barrier and stand out as an exemplar, it's not so difficult, and it's not straightforward. So again, that's why I say it's only 6 years in. We're not even close to being able to prove that out. But that's why we are able to cut through the noise and focus on what is most important to us. So sorry if that was a rambling answer, but that's the reality of it.
It was a great insight. And what I've understood right now is, especially in states where the VC funds are like really, really big, when you have these legendary funds like Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, or maybe something like Sequoia or Park Lernens, these funds, they have like the next 5 funds, they're all booked. You can't even invest in them. And it's always, people think, what makes them so good? What is the secret recipe? They have sort of uncovered. And you just very beautifully said, it's not a secret recipe or a secret sauce. It's just that with their experiences, you build credibility. You have to be transparent with the founders. You have to sort of work with them, take them along, add value. And that's what sort of like, gets integrated in your firm's DNA. And I totally see that, the level of understanding you have about these, deep topics which even till now, perplexes investors, experienced investors. How this process actually works. You beautifully put it. Pranav, I also know that running a venture capital fund in India is probably one of the toughest entrepreneurship experiences, I would say, in
I
the
agree with
world.
you. I agree.
And that also because it's not only your money, you're also liable for your LP's money, and raising a new fund would depend on how your current fund performs. You know, so I just want to understand, like from your whole experience in investing, and you made some landmark investments. What have been sort of, let's say, if I have to quantify your top three learnings coming out of investing with 314
Yeah.
Capital?
Yeah, the great question. So top three, I'll maybe, yeah. So I'll force rank and say number one, absolutely, is the value of integrity. There's no price on it. I have learned the hard way that, and I've seen founders, investors, all kind of stakeholders compromise on what they said they would never do. Right. And often, almost often, it is because they had to preserve some value or make sure they made some money or whatever. Right. Um, in the short term, yeah, sure, it may get you to your goals, the very short term objectives. But long term, I've seen the damage that does to reputations, the damage it does to relationships, and whatever happens, I have a zero compromise attitude to me crossing those boundaries, and I have learned to have a zero compromise attitude on other people crossing those boundaries with me. So it's very hard to say I'm never going to talk to these kind of people. I'm never going to work with these kind of people, irrespective of whatever kind of company they may build and however successful they may be. And I think that is it is very hard to objectively measure and put down as a boundary. But as a team, I'm very happy to say, between Siddharth and I, we have shared values. On our leadership team, we have shared values. I think there's no shortcut to that. And if we are able to enforce that consistently, even going forward, we've done that to our best ability for the first half of a decade. If we keep that going, I think our ability to stay focused on the right outcomes will be protected. So that is for me the most important thing. The second most important lesson I've learned is the importance of compromise. Now, I have to be transparent here. I don't like compromise. I put a lot of work into making sure I have the right biases. I lose money when I have wrong biases, by the way. I fail at my job when I have the wrong biases. I am a failure to my investors if my opinions are divorced from reality, right? So I can think of the fanciest thesis possible, but if reality doesn't align with what I think, I'm missing out the best ideas every day, right? So the humility that comes with knowing you will never be 100% right, you can't be. You have to. Your only job is to understand reality. Forget what you think you know, right? I think the ability to cut through all that and keep yourself intellectually and honestly, consciously honest. There's an internal and external process, a complete feedback loop. I think that is maybe the most valuable skill I've learned to build. Most people I know build this only after 10, 20 years of out there working experience, failing, succeeding, and then realizing this. Thankfully, we went through a lot of hassle in India. So as students, we go through this all the time. It's I must be honest, very high pressure environment, school and college. And then of course, going abroad, staying alone. So this learning coming early, I would say for investing, making sure that your biases don't cross over and pollute your version of reality. I think that's incredibly valuable if you do it right. And third, I would say, more than anything, look, we're investors, we're not founders. If we start taking credit for what the founders do, we will just lose that integrity, lose the relationships, and there's a pollution that there's a how do I put it? There's a halo or aura of negativity around you that starts being built that people can sense almost immediately, right? So I know many investors, especially on boards. I've been on very difficult boards where the investors always seem to claim to know more about that business than the founders running that company, right? And it always rubs me the wrong way because they're the founders. It's their labor, right? This is this entire construct. These thousands of people that work for them and work for this company are there because of what they know is right. Right. Now, your role as an investor is boundary conditioned to a certain limit. There are lines we are not required and should not cross. But I've seen things go horribly wrong when investors decide, okay, they know more than they should do it a certain way and so on. So there's a fine line between debate and forcing someone to do it a certain way. I think that boundary and learning what that boundary looks like for all kinds of people, right, all over the country, all over the world, that's been a very important parameter I learn every day. So how to stay within my boundary in spite of me wanting to make things work a certain way, that's a constant battle. I think again that's a really important skill. So I would say again, sorry if I'm rambling, but these are the kind of things that you don't learn in any MBA course, any textbook.
Right.
So I think that's just what I've taken away from my experiences.
Right, and it's totally reflective of when you sort of invest in the entrepreneur. You take him along with you, and you very rightly pointed out that's why a lot of these interesting entrepreneurs are actually sort of like working with you, and like building so much value, and that's why they're even able to build that value, because you offer the right kind of expertise in the right kind of way. And as you talked about the point of like, okay, you are the investor at the end of the day. Like, you won't know better than the guy whose job is to like build the product, and that is very, very beautifully put by you. Pranav, I know you're a very busy man. I won't take your time. I'll have one last question.
Please go ahead. Please.
Since you've since I've just covered how like a buy side investor thinks, I want to switch to the other side now. For an entrepreneur, who do you think makes a good entrepreneur and you would want to work with?
Great question. Wow, there's going to be a long answer, but I'll try to summarize. Look, we look for 5 things in a founder in a way that we call P0s, the highest priority items. Right.
Okay.
One is domain expertise. They have to know the market they're building in. Right? And many founders, again, many people in general, forget founders. Many people think they're good at one thing when they're actually good at something else, and they try to kind of borrow expertise from one domain to the other. It doesn't always work a 1-to-1 map. So we really spend a lot of time evaluating the domain itself, right? His or her domain expertise. And number 2, what we're doing is we're educating ourselves about that domain itself. So assume we're not foolish people, we're reasonably smart people. But again, we cannot afford to be wrong. So that point I mentioned about biases before, we have to have a ruthless honesty about what is the actual market reality. And their explanation to us, their domain expertise has to match with what we're seeing, right? So their domain expertise and our understanding of the market, those two, the way that dynamic loop works, I think that in the middle of that, when you find a match, is when you found the right kind of cultural resonance with that founding team. So that I would say those two are very important co-factors. Number 3, I think it's very important to understand from the founder why he or she is building this company, right? Honestly, look, let's talk about reality. Everyone would like to be wealthier. And if a startup works, yes, the founders, the employees, yes, they will get wealthier. The investors will make money. There's value created everywhere, right? But that can't be the only reason you're starting a company. What we realize is when people are in a hurry to start something for the sake of a financial benefit, then there are compromises made every day, which avalanche over time, cascade into, unfortunately, things not becoming that easy down the line. So I think the motivations of the founder, and equally importantly, are they willing to spend 10, 15 years building this thing in this market with this team, with these challenges for these customers? That's a lot of evaluation to make so early, right? And as early stage investors, we can't say, well, let's wait 3 years, let's see if he's the right guy, then we'll decide. No, like I said, we have to be early. So we literally don't have the time to evaluate that with an actual track record. So we have to get good at sensing motivation. 4, I would say discipline. And discipline is everything from, we evaluate discipline in many ways. The quality of your deck, consistency of fonts, it may sound trivial. The honesty in your projections, your Excel sheets, have you done client calls? Have you spoken to customers? Have you traveled outside of your bubble and actually seen what's actually going on? How are other people solving these problems? So I think there's a importance of discipline that we have to evaluate. And that's the same discipline we apply on us. So if I sit in Bangalore in a nice office and I think I understand, I have biases that are going to lose me money, right? So constantly going out there and figuring out what's working and talking to everyone and just improving your understanding of the graph of reality. I think if founders are doing that, we can evaluate it. We can see that they're also a similar mindset. That's really important for us. And last, I would say this is a recent revelation, especially now. It started 2019, 2020. But can these founding team members, do they have the gravity around them to attract great people to work with them? So the ability to recruit. I think that's another very subjective evaluation criteria, because How do you assess, will Pranav work for Asim? Will Asim work for someone else, right? How do you really measure that, right? But, there are ways through your interactions, through, reference calls, through understanding networks, through seeing who's part of the early team, to see the dynamic between the founders themselves, what attracted them to each other. I think there are a lot of ways you can look at the ability to recruit. And broadly, I would say the ability to build a gravity well around them, right? So the best founders today, if you look at people like Baiju Ravindran, Deepender at Zomato, the founders of Swiggy, all these large companies now, the founders of even Oyo, Ritesh, for example, get people to convince themselves and convince, obviously, both ways, get together and build. This is real important vision, right? That is very hard to measure, but you can notice it when you're early. And I think investing in making the founders even more powerful on that dimension, a good investor is able to do that. And if you make all these 5 things work, of course, besides the market and the pricing and all the standard objective criteria, I think these are the 5 things that personally I look for when we're looking at teams.
Got it. Thank you so much, Pranav, for giving this rare and this very interesting insight on how you sort of like go about evaluating these startups. And thanks a lot for doing this podcast again.